Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching Straight Talk. For a second there, I forgot the name of my channel because we do not speak to our audience in English very often, only when the events in the region of South Caucasus and Eastern Europe demand that we do. Today is the 30th of September 2023. For those of you who will be watching in the recording of the program today that we're airing live. Right now I'm in Washington, D.C., and it is 1:07 p.m. and it is 9:07 p.m. in Yerevan, Tbilisi, and Baku, Azerbaijan, where I am from. My name is Ismail Jalilov, for those of you who do not watch us regularly. So we're trying to figure out what is going on in our region in South Caucasus. As you probably know from the news, there is a huge line of cars with civilians in them departing Azerbaijan through Lachen border checkpoint in the direction of Armenia. We are reading coverage in the Western news and basically news of any nation. I was joking the other day on one of my Telegram channels saying that there are only two issues in which the US, Ukrainian, Russian, and European media see eye to eye, that the water is wet and that there is an ethnic cleansing going on in Azerbaijan, in Karabakh. So jokes aside, we're trying to figure out, we're trying to get to the bottom of this, whether there is indeed an ethnic cleansing going on in Azerbaijan. You know, sometimes when you live in the most historically defining periods of time, you do not know, you do not realize, you do not understand that the times are ominous and they're going to change things forever. I have a feeling that we're living in these times. We're living in the times when we're going to go back in the future and think, what did I do? What did I say? What did I think at that particular moment in time? Is there something horrible, horrifying, blood-curdling going on, and I'm being silent? I do not know. I'm listening to both sides of the story, and I'm not going to lie. I believe one side more than the other, but I'm keeping my mind open, and I'm trying to educate myself, and I'm hoping that we will educate ourselves together today, because we're speaking to Onnik J. Krikorian. He's been on my program quite a few times. He's a British journalist, and he's joining us from Tbilisi, Georgia. Onnik, good evening. Thank you for coming.
Hi, Ismail. Good to be here.
You know, there are many questions, and it's quite an emotional juncture for you and for me and for everybody else who lives in our region and beyond. I would like to start with something I came across this morning. It's Kavita Bilani, a Malaysian national with UNHCR based in Armenia. And the things she said at her press briefing yesterday were quite interesting. If you don't mind, let's take a listen, and then I'll come back to you.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, if I understood the question, you're asking me is if we are collecting information on mistreatment or of what people faced in Nagorno-Karabakh. Sorry.
I think the question was when they were on the move.
No, so far there are no recorded incidents. There's no reported incidences of any mistreatment. Of course, I mean the long journey and the tired journey and the congestion is difficult for people. But no, there have been no reported cases of any mistreatment by the Azeris. Maybe others who have experienced that could share, but not to us, thanks. And we also have protection monitoring being conducted at the Goris Registration Center, also in Kornizo, when people first arrived. And we did ask the question about how people's journey was, and everybody said that they were allowed to leave. At the Lachin corridor, they were allowed to leave quite freely. And nobody shared instances of being harassed. Thanks.
All right. What Kavita Bilani said, I know you're not hearing Skype, but I sent you the screenshot of the press briefing as well. And let me show this on the UN side as well for those who are watching us, bi-weekly press briefing from which I showed the video just now. There were no recorded incidents or cases of mistreatment against people on the move, said Ms. Bilani. Onnik, I'm kind of curious. What do you think people are fleeing then? Why are they fleeing? What is going on exactly that prompts so many people to leave? Let me also show the article that you wrote yesterday. I saw it yesterday. It was written on the 28th of September. Nagorno-Karabakh demise, a long predicted end to a better dispute. I urge my audience to read this. There is this little part that I'm going to quote to you in which you say the following, and let me show this on screen for the people to see. Just one second. I'm trying to do a billion things at the same time. With more than 70,000 ethnic Armenians having reportedly left Karabakh since a ceasefire agreement signed just a day later, the story has not ended. A battered and dismembered Karabakh will exist until the end of the year, while negotiations between Baku and Karabakh representatives continue with steps already being taken to slowly integrate into Azerbaijan. It is unclear how many of those that remain will stay. The situation aggravated as it is by very real fears born from 3 decades of conflict and calls in some circles for them to flee. What are these circles, I wonder? Who is calling on people to flee?
Unfortunately, in my opinion, I've seen very many regional analysts immediately urge for a humanitarian corridor. And also state that they're concerned about massacres on the route out. Also, Armenian civil society activists and some analysts who work within civil society have also, or did also, call for the same. Ironically, however, as the UNHCR head said, we have had no reports of any mistreatment along the route, and also we've also seen videos of people calmly passing through the Azerbaijani checkpoint on the Hakkari Bridge. Moreover, although there were concerns about every single man being arrested by Azerbaijan, that hasn't been the case. Of course, we know one notable case, Ruben Vardanyan, but those were to be expected, rightly or wrongly. And I guess I haven't really been following the news today. There were some others who have been detained, but I guess that was via Hakkari, although David Babayan is said to have gone to Shusha because he knew that he was on the wanted list. And I find that unfortunate because, you know, there were a few who believed that they should have stayed. Moreover, at the beginning, the Karabakh authorities only issued an instruction for those people who had been displaced from their homes, mainly in villages, and could not return, or those who could or did not have any shelter. Only those people should leave. But of course, because of these fears, because of this uncertainty, you know, we then suddenly saw most of the population, if not all of the population, leave en masse, even though, again, the authorities repeated time and time again, you know, wait your turn, we will issue the announcement when you can go. They also warned against incidents and accidents if people continue to amass in the numbers that they were, and sadly, that probably contributed to the number of dead at the fuel depot explosion that happened soon after the exodus started.
You know, watching the miles and miles of, you know, highways completely blocked by the number of civilians, children among them, the elderly, women, you know, at some point it becomes impossible to argue that these people, you know, that it is okay for them to leave, that it is okay for Azerbaijan, you know, to not to try to stop them. So let me not put words in anybody's mouth. Do you think Azerbaijan is trying to stop them from fleeing? I don't mean closing the borders and forcing them to stay, but do you think there are messages that are being sent, that are being heard by the people? At least, do you think something gives them a second's pause, whether, you know, when they think fight or flight kind of thing? And I don't mean to say fight, stay or flee. Do you think Azerbaijan is doing so effectively? Do you think Azerbaijan is doing it in good faith? Why are they not hearing the messages? Are they ineffective? Are they insincere? Do they not believe Azerbaijan completely? Because, you know, I'm imagining to, you know, pack up and leave and, you know, leave your entire life behind is a very difficult decision. So people would probably grasp at straws in order to justify why they stayed. Why do they not stay?
I think it's that issue of fear and uncertainty. I mean, there's been enough scare stories, you know, based on reality, that have occurred over the past 30 years. Memories are still fresh of 2020. They're even fresher now because of the fighting that happened, most recently, the military strike. What I find with regards to Azerbaijan, I mean, I can't put my head into myself into the heads of the leaders in Azerbaijan. I don't think that they probably, yeah, I don't know is the answer. Do they want or do they not? But and also they couldn't stop really anyway, because if they stopped, they would be accused of some nefarious business as well. You know, and unfortunately in this conflict, we can't win. If they let them through, then it's ethnic cleansing. If they stop them, then they're preparing a concentration camp. As for the people themselves, yes, it's a very difficult thing to do that. And I'm, you know, it's a little depressing as well, right? However, I saw also the UNHCR head say today, or she was quoted by Radio Free Europe's Armenia service, saying that in her meetings with people displaced from Karabakh, there are two main questions that they have. What is the integration process that Azerbaijan has? And also, will there be monitoring, and what shape will that monitoring be? That's interesting for me, because at least there's possibly the hope that some of them do want to return. Recently, I was speaking to an Azerbaijani friend who was pleased that none of them had set fire to their homes, for example, which is what we saw at the end of the 2020 conflict. This, I mean, we don't know what the reasoning is behind this, but it could also be just in case. And that's what I hope, although, you know, many people will say that that's very unrealistic at the moment. I think with regards to Baku, I mean, its message probably isn't heard. I mean, one, there's a problem with electricity, or was a problem with electricity in Karabakh, probably the internet too. And also one of the things that I was waiting for was Samvel Shahramanyan, the de facto head of Karabakh, to also make some very visible statements, of which I didn't see. So maybe all those factors combined, but there's no doubt that the feeling of fear and uncertainty were the main overriding factors in their decision to go. Now the question is what happens next to them? How many of them are considering returning? Because again, you know, not everyone took all their possessions with them. It seems, to repeat this again, none of them burned their homes. So the potential is at least there. And I personally hope, although this will probably be something that you speak about later, I personally hope there is that chance for return as well.
You know, that was my next question. How many of them do you think will return? We have a few conflicts in memory, in recent memory, from which we can sort of try and arrive at a number. If we look at Srpska Krajina in Croatia, I believe roughly half of 250,000 Serbs that fled the region had returned later when the conflict died down. Do you think, at least, you know, to begin with, we had a huge sort of like difference in numbers cited by both sides as to how many people lived in Karabakh to begin with, how many ethnic Armenians. The Armenian side and Karabakh claimed 120,000. Azerbaijan said roughly half of it is true. And we're looking at the number exceeding 80,000 who had crossed from Karabakh into Armenia, according to Armenian sources. So do we have certainty? Do we trust the numbers? Is there independent monitoring of the numbers of people who have crossed the border to begin with? And then how are we going to know how many of them return? Do you think it's plausible to think that one half of them will return eventually and settle down back in, you know, the region from which they fled?
So we don't know what the numbers are. And since the 2020 ceasefire agreement, I've been guesstimating, and I have no clue, let's put it like that. But guesstimating, I was putting the number anywhere between 50 to 80,000 and basically erring on the side of 80,000. So for me, although I get your point, it's not implausible that there could have been 100,000 leaving. We truly didn't know. And I hope that there will be some independent monitoring of that. 1 second, excuse me.
No worries, actually. Okay,
So
if you're back.
What's happening? Now is that the international community is going to be supplying a lot of humanitarian assistance, and one would reckon that they must have accurate numbers to do that. However, it also has to be said that the Armenian government, whilst counting the number of people that are passing through, haven't registered all of them. A lot of the people are not going to register for various reasons. One of them is, for example, the size of the queues. Others are reportedly going to stay with relatives and don't need assistance in finding accommodation in Armenia. Nikol Pashinyan's government recently announced that they will be paying a one-off fee of $255 equivalent in Armenian dram to those refugees that, I presume go to a government building and say, look, we're here, could we have our $255? So I hope that will clarify things. I think the UN agencies and other international humanitarian organizations will have to verify these figures. But this argument is coming up a lot. And by the way, recently, today, the number is over 100,000. It's 100,470 or 80 or something like this. I was going to say something. I can't remember what that was. I lost my train of thought. But also, we've not had any rejection of those numbers by Baku, at least yet. So I assume they are doing as much monitoring as they can. Anyway, I don't think anyone, sorry to say, believed really the 40,000 figure.
So in other words, if Baku does not dispute the numbers of people leaving, they had been lying. I mean, because math is math.
I'm not going to say that. We've been in the middle of a propaganda war for a long time. Also, if it turns out 100,000 and there's only a few hundred left, then obviously 120,000 figure wasn't accurate. Anyway, I think we've been working with a lot of guesstimates, estimates, and the propaganda war has played into that to some extent.
Onnik, I'm sorry, while we're on the subject, I'm really sorry for interrupting. Are we not missing the forest for the trees here? We're all concentrated on the numbers of people who have fled. What about the people who have stayed? What makes them different from others? Who is not leaving? Can we talk about those people? How many are there? What are they hoping for? Are they not fearing the Azerbaijani government or army like the rest? What makes these people different from the other? What makes the reaction so different?
First of all, just to go back to those numbers, I mean, I've been having this discussion with a lot of people in Azerbaijan this past 2 days. And whether it's 40,000, 50,000, 80,000 or 100,000, it's still tens of thousands. And if we are going to be talking about the human aspects of this, we should remember that there are tens of thousands that have left their homes because of the fear and the uncertainty. Who is remaining? We don't know who is remaining. This is the problem, and we still don't know what the accurate figure is. If it's 120,000, then if this is now dried up, the exodus, then that means there's 20,000 who are going to be staying. But I'm not sure that people actually believe that. And those that might have left, I don't know, maybe are unable to. So I think I wouldn't want to really speculate on that because, one, we don't know if anyone has remained, how many have remained, and certainly why they might have remained. I think the focus should be on is creating an environment conducive for these people who have left to make an informed decision about whether or not they should return. Because life as a refugee, as many IDPs and refugees from the war of the 90s will know, is not easy. And so I think that should be a focus. Of course, it's their choice to return or not. And a lot of that will depend on what security and guarantees and rights and responsibilities, etc., are offered to them.
While you were answering the previous question, I was showing the website reintegration.gov.az. This website is in 3 languages, from what I could understand, maybe even in 4. Yes, in 4 actually: Azerbaijani, Armenian, English, and Russian. I'll show the site here for just 1 second, and those who would like to look at it can do so. My question is, are people... This is a message. This is obviously the message. The site is a little, iffy on the details. Not a lot of information is there. It was probably put together hastily, but at least this is the initial first step. What do you think the message of the government of Azerbaijan is here? What do you think the people, how does it resonate? What do Armenians looking at this website, however many or few of them, think of, the attempt by Azerbaijan to reintegrate them? What kind of emotions? I understand I'm asking a British journalist living in Tbilisi, currently at least being based in Tbilisi, but let's try to figure this out.
So, for one thing, I hope that the site is being read by Armenians. There was some speculation that maybe it's not accessible in Armenia because of a ban on gov.az domain names. I'm not in Yerevan, so I can't check that. If anyone is in Yerevan and watching this, then maybe you could check it and actually see if it is. Hastily put together, yeah, probably the negotiations are also going on. As far as I'm looking at it, it's more just like to get a registry of names and to understand their legal status or not. I'm not sure what the Azerbaijani government's current position is, but as I recall, it was those people that were born in Karabakh who are eligible to apply for Azerbaijani citizenship. Now, how many would? That's something else. I'll also be brutally honest with you. I do believe in reconciliation. I do want to see ethnic Armenian Azerbaijani coexistence and co-inhabitation. But there are days, and many of them, where I think, is this even possible? To suddenly go from an environment where you've been out of Baku's rule and then to be under Baku's rule. I mean, and again, if this is even possible, it will depend on what the terms are of the integration process and also whether or not there is some kind of mechanism to monitor it. I want to give you a very frivolous example. I'm a British citizen, and when my country voted to leave the European Union, I was depressed for 6 months. And earlier this year, I had to do the unthinkable, which I dreaded. I had to send my Burgundy passport to get it replaced with a new blue passport.
British passport that is no longer a European Union insignia bears it. Okay.
And for me, that was difficult. Can you imagine how hard it's going to be for someone in Karabakh to return there with their, ironically, blue Armenian passport to receive a green Azerbaijani one? I mean, if they stay, they will have to do this unless some kind of accommodation is permitted, which has been suggested in the past. But it will be particularly problematic for them, at least mentally, to do this. And I think a lot of it is about how they perceive this process. And until they know what the mechanisms for their protection are, and you can understand that even if you're not going to go out and beat up an Armenian, the point is, for them, they will be terrified of you until there's people-to-people contact and also a sense of that security.
Onnik, I appreciate your example of trading one passport for the other, but let me sort of like push back on this. The example, however, it's demonstrative, but is it a good example? Because the British government, the United Kingdom and the European Union did not fight a bloody war a couple of years ago. So there's this whole emotional aspect of it. Am I trading my passport, Armenian? I'm trying to put myself in the head of the everyday Armenian living in Karabakh. Am I trading the passport of my homeland for the passport of an enemy that was trying to kill me? That probably goes through people's head. What days? You said there are good days and bad days. I'm trying to bring to that. What happens that makes you lose hope? What happens that would push that, proverbial Armenian in Karabakh who's sitting on the fence, undecided one way or the other, to sort of like make a decision and leave? What days depress you the most? What has to happen that makes you think that the reconciliation and cohabitation are not possible?
Well, I think it's the war of words. But just quickly to go back to your point about Brexit and this example, yes, entirely. And that's my point. If I'm like that about changing a burgundy passport for a blue one, which is frivolous, right, and doesn't mean much when you compare it to the idea of suddenly having to do that in this context, and especially after 30 years of conflict. Good or bad days. I mean, one day there's good news, the other day there's bad news. I mean, today in the morning I was quite despondent as well. But then I watched an interview with Ahmad Alili about the integration process in Armenia, Azerbaijan normalization, and I was actually encouraged. I still don't know if it can happen, but the point is that's the feeling that I got after watching it. So I think we've had this for 3 years now, right? 1 minute we're high, the next minute we're low, high, low, high, low, and we've been going through this process for 3 years now. So I think ultimately the answer to your question would be the lack of progress or still an elusive Armenia-Azerbaijan normalization agreement. That's one of the main things, because I've warned consistently that it's taking too long. The Russian peacekeepers were meant to be there until 2025. We assumed Baku would kick them out at that point. And yet here we are, almost 3 years into the introduction of the terms of that ceasefire agreement. And in my opinion, there's not much time left. And in fact, that's what I was saying beforehand. There wasn't much time left. You said I could mention it, that we had a discussion about a week before the military action, and I said that I believe that either Karabakh will implode because of the political situation in the country, or there would be the launching of military strikes. Actually, I said conflict, but I figured that it was more likely to be in Karabakh than it would be on the Armenia-Azerbaijan border.
Mm-hmm. Of course, you can mention it's very interesting to sort of trace how people thinking evolves with, the new information coming in, with the new events. And I believe right now we are living in the time when events are happening with unbelievable speed. People who were yesterday sort of making threats, and I'm talking about Ruben Vardanyan, right now in Baku custody. All these events are happening. The Karabakh, Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, which I don't think I've ever said that on the air ever, is dissolving itself. This is something I had to live with since I was 14. So, I'm trying to illustrate why I'm not very eloquent today and why I'm very emotional, because, it's very difficult. It is a perception that journalists do not have hearts and do not have emotions. And I think it's a lie. I think that's why people do not believe us, because we pretend that we're completely unbiased and completely objective, which I don't think we can be as human beings, which brings me to my next question. I'm reading about ethnic cleansing in about every language, in about every newspaper that I look at, online, hard copy, television reports, from Deutsche Welle to BBC to Russian federal channels. Are journalists being objective? Where does this ethnic cleansing is happening? Let's save Armenians from genocide agenda is coming from. First of all, I don't want to prejudge your position. Do you think ethnic cleansing is happening? Do you think this rises to the level of genocide? Does it not cheapen the very idea of genocide that, reading about genocide every day desensitizes you, it takes away something from your soul? So let's talk about this, and let's talk about journalists that are screaming about genocide and ethnic cleansing, and why.
I personally feel I don't use these terms myself because I think they're way too emotive. Also, we have to remember genocide is really up to people with legal knowledge to ascertain. Ethnic cleansing is not clearly defined. And I just think these are sensationalist terms. I don't use them myself. I can talk about people who are fleeing, but I personally don't use these terms myself. And let's remember why, because they have been said since day one. We've had this for 3 years as well now, that ethnic cleansing and genocide was occurring. You know, we're used to hearing this all the time. I think, by the way, you know, it doesn't help when you have statements from Azerbaijan that feed into these fears. But also at the same time, it doesn't help when Nikol Pashinyan is using them constantly as well. One day he says it's ethnic cleansing and genocide, and the next day he says he doesn't see a imminent threat to the lives of the Karabakh Armenians, and then the next day he changes his mind again as well. With regards to the, you know, people think we're all cold-hearted and unbiased and all this sort of stuff. I think one thing that has defined this conflict has been journalists becoming emotional about it, or at least seemingly emotional, whether for genuine reasons or because it makes a better story. I just don't think things are so black and white. As an example, I'll give you this. Armenians, or some Armenian activists, are trying to say that, listen, don't say ethnic cleansing, say genocide, because ethnic cleansing equals genocide. Well, if you're going to talk about the ethnic cleansing of Armenians from Karabakh, then you have to talk about the ethnic cleansing of 600,000 IDPs from the 7 regions surrounding Nagorno-Karabakh. So at the same time...
We're talking about Azerbaijanis, right? For those who are watching.
Surrounding Karabakh. Are you therefore suggesting that Armenia committed a genocide in the 90s then? You can't have it both ways. I think these are emotive terms. They're designed to get international support, and I think they cloud judgment. If Nikol Pashinyan is talking so much about ethnic cleansing, or Harutyunyan, or Shahramanyan, and so on and so forth, of course ethnic Armenians in Karabakh are going to flee for their lives.
Onnik, it's ironic if you're inclined to look for irony in a situation like this, but it's also very intriguing and interesting and commendable, if you allow me to say so, that I am hearing about 600,000 displaced Azerbaijanis from the area surrounding Karabakh, from an ethnic somebody with ties to Armenians, from you. I have not read about this in any Western media in the last several weeks that I am reading about the exodus of Armenians from Azerbaijan. It is as if these people do not exist. It is as if 600,000 Azerbaijanis never had to leave Armenia and Karabakh altogether. Why do you think this happens? Is Azerbaijan innately unable to tell its side of the story? Do you think that the Western journal it is a foregone conclusion for the Western journalists as to who is to blame in this conflict? Why do they not talk even for a second about what happened to Azerbaijanis and how they had to be displaced in numbers at least 3 times as higher?
Yeah, and then you could argue, like, why are people not talking about the exodus of ethnic Azerbaijanis from Armenia during that period, as well as the pogroms and the exodus of ethnic Armenians from Baku, Ganja, Sumgayit as well. I think Armenians are obviously better at telling stories. They're more widely dispersed. Some of them have very strong links with the media. Azerbaijan doesn't. Although I've seen, ambassadors and MPs on foreign channels where they do make this point. But I think also there's the other issue of there's a limited space for going into the complexities of this conflict, and that was then, and this is now, and that might be part of the reason. I mean, I would argue as well that it's been quite weird for me that you don't get many stories, for example, about the IDPs going back to their homes in the 7 regions, which I think is a story, and that's even from niche market publications that deal with the South Caucasus or surrounding regions, and yet we don't really have anything. What we've also had with the media is when anything bad happens, they're instantly active. And even some analysts are like this. You won't hear from them when there's a peace process going on, or trying to encourage support for the peace process. But when something bad happens, then they're writing threads on Twitter.
Why? Does conflict sell? Does negative news, negativity sell? And Twitter is, whatever it is called now. Yeah, but why do these people go dormant when there is good news, good stretch, and immediately jump out at you when something bad happens? Is there a reason for that, do you think?
I mean, again, I can't put myself into their heads, but
let's speculate. It's okay.
Well, I try not to speculate because I don't like it, but I would say after seeing this perpetually for the past 3 years, part of me thinks is that they just don't like the terms of what is likely to be a peace agreement. Sometimes it feels as though they haven't yet faced up to the reality that was pretty clear on 10th of November 2020. Part of me views the actions as they think they can change the situation still, when it's quite clear they can't, and any delay in getting this deal signed is more likely to lead to bad things rather than good things. Part of this is also if they've covered the conflict before, or if they've been involved in the processes before 2020, then maybe they're just locked into this idea of 30-year-long status quos. Maybe that's it. I mean, there's a multitude of reasons, I think. Yeah. You're on mute.
Forgive me. If you don't mind, I'm sorry I'm dwelling on this. And it's because I'm seriously fascinated with what's going on in the media, because I'm trying to put myself in the place of my colleagues. But do you think, as a Westerner, you can put on your Westerner hat and for 1 second forget your ties to the region and the fact that you reside in the region now. But, let's look at this conflict with fresh eyes. We don't know anything about the region. We don't know anything about the conflict in its prehistory. Do you think Azerbaijan is at all able to tell its story? Indulge me for 1 second. This is my theory, and I don't claim that it is true. But, by the nature of its government and its state, and by the nature of who we have in charge, we may call Azerbaijan authoritarian without, crossing any boundaries. It is a foregone conclusion. It's not a democratic nation. Okay. In a nation that is not democratic, I believe public opinion is perceived as a commodity, as something that is sold, bought, exchanged, manipulated, or ignored if the need be. Do you think Azerbaijan in general and its president understand what public opinion means around the world? Because from where I stand, it seems like Ilham Aliyev believes, I sent messages to the heads of your states. Maybe I appeased them, be it with energy deals or, whatever else, reconstruction deals, through my money and influence around. So I am not even going to bother to deal with your public opinion. What your people think of the conflict, I do not care. Does it sound like I'm being fair, or maybe I'm unfair? Maybe I have criticism to that. And do you think Azerbaijan would serve itself better if it concerned itself for a second with what average people on the street in France or Germany or the United States think about this conflict?
I think what you've said is pretty fair. But on the other hand, it does strike me that accusing Baku of ethnic cleansing has touched a raw nerve. I've seen a number of instances of this. I'm sorry, I can't remember her surname, but one of your MPs, her first name is Nigar.
Nigar Arpadaray, probably you're talking about.
Yes, that's her. She became very emotional and on I can't remember which station it was, Al Jazeera or something, yesterday or today, I can't remember when I watched it. You have the ambassador of Azerbaijan to England, who's also talking a lot about, it isn't ethnic cleansing, we want to reintegrate these people. And Hikmet Hajiev has been consistently trying to address this narrative as well. Yeah, this is one of the interviews I saw, although I think it was a different interview with Nigar and Arsen that I watched today. I think that is something they don't want to be accused of. This is something, but I would also say then, please, if you don't want to be accused of it, then it's time to allow greater transparency into the process. Many people rightfully say there are no international journalists on the ground within the territory now under the control of Baku. And that's the reality, right?
I reached out to Azerbaijan, to the government people that I know, and I don't know many, and not even less people would like to talk to me on or off the record. But it is my understanding, again, given the fact that Azerbaijan is an authoritarian state, that Azerbaijan fears international journalists because it cannot control the story that they will write. The way I was explained, basically, as if I were a fourth grader, which I asked them to, is this. You know, let's imagine a government official issues a visa to a foreign journalist, let's say somebody from the BBC or Deutsche Welle. Then they come to Azerbaijan, you know, and instead of all the attempts to woo them and to explain our pain, they go back to London or Berlin and write a story that is highly negative of Azerbaijan, and then that government official gets headache, you know, or maybe they're fired. So that is the way the authoritarian governments think. Do you think that the events that are happening in the region are going to change their minds eventually, or do you think it's going to be they're going to be even more entrenched in their position? Because it's an easy narrative to write and to convince your own people. The Westerners hate us because we're Turks. They hate us because we're Muslim, and that's it. We're not going to let any foreign journalists in. Do you think this logic is going to hold for longer?
I have no idea, but maybe we'll see. I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was the ambassador of Azerbaijan to the United Kingdom who said that they do plan to let international journalists in. Let's see. Well, there's also talk, UN are going to review the situation this weekend. If they haven't today, I don't know, maybe tomorrow. And then there's still this talk about some kind of international monitoring group. We don't know if it's a one-off visit or maybe a regular visit or whatever. So I hope that we'll get some information out. I think obviously it's counterproductive not to let these people in to Azerbaijan to see there. Now, I understand there are security issues that they claim, and that's probably correct. Do we know if there are still armed units operating in the territory of Karabakh? That's quite possible. I'm not sure there's an issue with mines in the territory that was inhabited by the ethnic Armenians prior to their departure. But, you know, there are these issues as well. Are there continuing operations to try to locate stragglers? I have no idea. I hope it changes, including me. I'd love to be able to go and report on this as well. But I could never do that anyway, let alone now. So, we'll see. But definitely transparency is in their interest. You mentioned, they might go and write a negative story. Well, for sure, they're writing negative stories now. Maybe they do have to consider, loosening up a little, despite the risks. That's going to be self-fulfilling anyway if you don't.
Onnik, we hear different voices on both sides. The Azerbaijanis I speak with, they are convinced, many of them, that it's a good thing that Armenians are leaving Karabakh. We cannot live with them because sooner or later they're going to wait for our weak moment and then, stick a knife in our backs like they did before. That is the argument. Armenians on the other side are saying that, we cannot live with Azerbaijanis because all they want to do is kill us. And I'm looking at both societies and both sides, and I'm in the middle, sort of. Not equidistant, of course, that would be stupid to argue, but I am trying to hear both sides. And to me, it seems that authoritarian governments, with all their flaws and all the problems inherent in them, they have a better chance of changing or turning around the public opinion, influencing it, since they control all the channels of information, And what's going on in Armenia, on the other hand? Armenia says it is a more democratic society, and I believe them. I'm inclined to believe them. Do you think it'll be more difficult to sort of change the perception and prepare the people for reconciliation and reintegration, or, you know, peaceful coexistence, at least, in one country or the other, because they're so different in the way their governments and the states are structured?
Definitely, the more democratic, or let's do speech marks here, for Armenia, does create problems. We're already seeing Nikol Pashinyan's ratings plummet. And as for the whole thesis of your question, I remember in the early 2000s, I think I was with Tom Duval and possibly David Stern, and we were discussing this around the time of Key West, and I think we were pondering whether or not it was easier for Heydar Aliyev at the time to agree to a peace deal than it would be even for someone like Robert Kocharian, although bear in mind he was new to the throne, let's call it that, and faced potentially more unrest and also more opposition, not only from inside Armenia, but also from a diaspora that he had invested a lot of focus on. So that's possible. We shall see. It doesn't help that Nikol Pashinyan is erratic, shall we say, can be incredibly unpredictable, and also very inconsistent. But at the moment, he seems to be okay, although his ratings have been plummeting because the alternative is not very liked by most Armenians. Although it is interesting to see how the recent mayoral elections were in Yerevan, with like something like, what was it, almost 70% of the population or the electorate that turned out to vote effectively voting for parties against him.
Onnik, let me ask you this. Since we're talking about Armenia, I'm trying to get to Armenia too. Sorry, by the end of the interview. You use air quotes for describing democracy in Armenia. Do you have any reason to believe that democracy in Armenia is not real, or maybe it's not as real as we'll hope it is? What kind of democratic problems do we see in Armenia itself?
I'm not in Armenia, but let me just put it like this. First of all, there are already
I'm not in Azerbaijan, I'm sorry, and I know that there is no democracy in Azerbaijan.
I think that I would say that you can argue it's more democratic. You've already used the term. That's why I would steer clear of democracy. But I think that Nikol's whole accession to where he is now was for a populist revolution, also air quotes. And also he used confrontation and ultimatums to force his way to power. And he was never really contested. There was what do you call it, a cult of identity or whatever, a cult of personality that surrounded him. And the 2020 war saw how that crumble, and how it was not the basis for a democracy. We shall see. There's a lot of people reportedly being arrested, opposition leaders, and so on and so forth. I'm sure many of them are guilty of it, but the point is that they're politically motivated. Often, I think one of the mistakes that was made after 2018 was that no one really looked at the Georgian example of the Rose Revolution and how that progressed after Mikhail Saakashvili came to power, to look at what happened positively, but then look at how quickly his demise accelerated, especially since 2007, and try to stop Armenia from following the same pattern.
Right, I was going to ask you about this Georgian. Yes, pardon me. Go ahead.
There are some analysts who agree with me. Richard Girogosyan, for example, recently said he believes Armenia has a bright future, so I could be incredibly wrong. However, a lot of the analysts are incredibly critical of Nikol, and they also blame him for the loss of Karabakh now.
So, if we can go back for to the Georgian example for a second, what do you think that spells for Armenia? Let's look at all the players here. A lot of hope was associated with Georgia. A lot of money was pouring in from the West to build democratic institutions in Georgia and make it a shining example for the rest of us in the region, for all of us. Do you think the lessons of Georgia were learned in the way Armenia now is being portrayed as, a beacon of hope for democracy in the region? Because forgive me for being immodest, but I believe that without democratic Azerbaijan, democratic South Caucasus is not possible.
I always said that without a democratic Georgia, then a democratic and prosperous region is not possible. And we shall see what happens in Georgia. But, there are some grounds for concern. Interestingly, some analysts, like I said, do believe that it is, are now actually using the term of that Armenia is the new beacon of democracy in the region. I strongly disagree. In May, in rankings now may surpass Georgia in some categories, but we've yet to see what happens. Let's see what happens when Nikol's grip of power is truly threatened. We don't know. Is he going to go quietly? Is he going to use force? We simply don't know.
What is your view of the? Sorry, if you finished your thought. What is your view of the recent wave of demonstrations in Yerevan? Do you think these were staged? Do you think they reflect the public anger of the entire Armenian society, or do you think they represent the views of a very small minority?
I don't know what the general feeling in Armenia is, but it's been said that most people are despondent and apathetic and don't have faith in anyone. Recently, there was a Track 2 meeting of Armenian, Azerbaijani, and Georgian youth, and this was just before the mayoral elections. And I asked some of the Armenian participants, like, who would you vote for? Wanting to know, are you going to vote for Pashinyan's candidate, or are you going to vote for a former associate of Pashinyan, who was mayor in the past until he fell out with Nikol after the war? And they said that we're not going to vote at all. We don't trust any of them. And I think that's what is keeping Nikol in his position at the moment, is there's a great deal of apathy. And for the opposition, there is no viable or credible alternative to Pashinyan at this stage. And I think I've long argued that the danger is that when a figure like that does emerge, then Nikol could be in real trouble. I know a lot of people are seeming to suggest that, the Russians are behind the opposition protests. There's no doubt that a lot of these parties taking part are more sympathetic towards Moscow, even after 2020. But I'm not there, and I can't say if they're manufactured by them. But one thing I will say is that Nikol seems every day to find something else to really infuriate Putin with. And while some people, I'm sure like yourself, would be like, yay, go, well done,
I'm sorry, I'm not going to lie that, I think otherwise. Yeah.
That's a very dangerous game to play, because there is no there's no sign of any alternative stepping in, either for trade or for security or whatever, even if you can say security in air quotes when it comes to Russia and Armenia.
Well, I'm sorry, but I sort of, I try to, understand things through empathy. And I do empathize with the Armenian people in this. The Armenian people thought that they have an ally, a friend, and a protector in Russia. And we have all seen that grotesquely disproven in 2020 and afterwards, and even now, these days. So, security, is Russia viewed... And is Russia and security is even used in the same sentence in Armenia nowadays, do you think?
Probably not by most, certainly not by most analysts. Even those who are against Nikol's policy on Russia don't say, we're secure with them. But they do point out that it's hardly likely that hard security guarantees are going to be given by the West either. I think that's where many people are at with this. Also, don't forget that even if the trust in Russia has also incredibly dropped, a lot of people still have relatives working abroad in Russia. Armenia still gets very discounted gas from Russia. Russia controls the railroads, the energy distribution system, and so on. So they may reluctantly view Russia as there. But I do think, that it's said, I'm not there, as I said, but many people say that there's very little trust in Russia. Although, again, maybe their expectations were too high. I mean, Libarijan recently did a presentation which you might have watched, where he said that Armenia is perpetually waiting for saviors. Put faith in Russia, they didn't help. Put faith in France, they didn't help. Pelosi came over, she didn't help. We just had the Senate hearing where the Assistant Secretary for State said, you know, under no circumstances we allow this. And then what happens? The US did nothing.
Look, Onnik, it's very interesting that you bring this up. In 2020, when I suggested, and I was completely serious and I was not being disingenuous at all, when I suggested that Armenia should look for security guarantees from Azerbaijan and Turkey for its own independence, I was laughed out of the room. And I understand that sentiment. You know, I did not take offense in that. But with time, who else can provide security if not the very nations that are source of your insecurity, right? I mean, maybe I'm thinking outside the box here. Maybe I do not understand. Maybe I'm too naive or too Pollyannic. All of it might be true. I've heard that, definitely. But has that thinking evolved? Russia did not help. India did not help. France did not help. The United States is unwilling to project power on the region right now for whatever reasons. Can Armenia in any way, shape, or form trust the security guarantees by Azerbaijan and by Turkey? And do you think, as you know, addition to this question, Azerbaijan and Turkey are willing to extend those security guarantees? Sort of say we're not going to attack you. The president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, recently in the address to the nation said that Azerbaijan does not have an eye, and I'm translating it probably too literally, it does not have an eye on Armenia's territory. In other words, Azerbaijan is not willing to threaten Armenia's territorial integrity. Do you think people are hearing this and believing this at all?
No, they're not believing it at all. And I also don't think that many will believe that Turkey and Azerbaijan can be security guarantors. However, I mean, it's fair to say that ending conflict and having good relations with your neighbors and also having some kind of interdependency would prevent that conflict. I'm also not sure if in terms of security, who the hell is going to really attack Armenia in the region.
Okay. I know we've already approached this answer from various points, but I would like to ask a pointed question about what the exodus of ethnic Armenians from Karabakh does to Armenia and the Armenian society. And let me put it this way. I do not indulge in conspiracy theories, but it doesn't mean that I do not hear them, that I'm not exposed to them, be it on Telegram, be it in comments on my channel. By the way, I would like the audience to comment on this video and see and ask questions, because maybe when Onnik again agrees to come back, we will address your questions to him. Onnik, there are several conspiracy theories floating around. First of all, Azerbaijan is in cahoots with Russia to expel ethnic Armenians in order to destabilize Pashinyan internally, in order, you know, because many of them represent the Karabakh clan that is politically the rival of the current prime minister of Armenia. Some analysts from Baku and politicians from Baku on my channel, alas in a different language, I would have you listen, said that Ilham Aliyev does understand that he's playing to the hand of Russia, but he cannot just stop this train. He cannot act differently, so he is forced to do what Russia wants him to do. In other words, expel Armenians, send them all to Armenia, and destabilize Pashinyan government. Do you think these theories have any credence? Do you think, and what does it do in general, the fact that so many, at least more than 100,000 people have come into the Republic of Armenia? What does it do for its current government?
I mean, I personally don't believe in conspiracy theories, or at least try to avoid them. I've heard that theory about how, you know, they were sent there to foment revolution and instability and such, but I don't really think that they are. I mean, you know, we've got so many narratives going on. You know, one minute they're being ethnically cleansed, the next minute they're Putin's revolutionaries. I think quite a lot of them are just normal, everyday people who just want to have a stable and certain life. However, there have been a number of comments by analysts and researchers in Armenia saying on the one hand that it's possible that some of this new influx could become politically active, and therefore have an impact on the situation in Armenia at some point, though not necessarily immediately. And others who say that it's a priority to make sure that the existing political parties do not try to exploit this sudden increase in numbers into the country as well. Whoever you listen to, I mean, there are so many theories going around. On the one hand, Russia and Baku are in cahoots. Another common one, but from the Armenian opposition, is that Nikol is a Turkish spy in reality, and that he's already made a deal to become a protectorate of Azerbaijan and Turkey. I mean, there are so many conspiracy theories circulating, and I just tend to want to focus on what I'm seeing on the ground at this moment in time. And I think some of them can just be dismissed until there's proper evidence of that existing. But for sure, Putin must be furious with Pashinyan. It seems like every single day Pashinyan does something or says something that I don't feel as though you should really poke the bear like that, no matter if it's considered weakened in Ukraine.
So do you think the ethnic Armenians coming into Armenia right now, can they be easily used in order to punish Pashinyan by Putin? In other words, we've all seen the Russian flag raised in Stepanakert, Khankendi, in the form of a Z, which is the letter for the invasion of Ukraine. We have seen that. So it makes me wonder, are these people, ethnic Armenians of Karabakh, are they susceptible to the Russian propaganda? Can Putin raise them against Pashinyan right now if he wanted to punish him?
I think that most of those people are probably at the moment searching for a place to stay and wondering about their future. And I don't think, and in fact, one thing that has struck me today is looking at many of the interviews. I mean, you have a variety, right? You have some people who are grief-stricken. You have some people who seem quite calm about it. And actually, famous last words, but so far I've seen very few of them screaming and shouting. I have seen some have screamed against Harutyunyan, for example. I'm sure others are shouting at Pashinyan. As I said already, amongst a certain number of analysts in Armenia, there's great anger at Nikol Pashinyan, who they believe is responsible for this. Now, that narrative can be very effectively used. One thing about that Zed in Karabakh, it was a flash mob. Right? I don't know how many people were there. What was it, 50? I don't think we should judge flash mobs on the basis and consider that reflective of the entire population. I think that would be wrong to do everywhere. I'm not dismissing that they might have they might be sympathetic towards the Russians still, but I don't think that's enough to say that the whole of Karabakh is somehow Putinist in nature.
Okay. I want to finish sort of on the same subject that we started. Könül Shahin, whom you and I both know, is asking a question that is probably the heart of this whole, it epitomizes our entire conversation here. What should the Azerbaijani government do to convince Karabakh Armenians to return back to their homes? What do you think these people want to hear? And how do you think the government of Azerbaijan should frame the message to make the message convincing? I mean, the website is great, all of that, but what do these people want to hear to be reassured?
Well, I think they probably want it to sound genuine, for one thing. I think they'd probably like to have the war of words ended. I think they'd like to know details of what exactly this integration plan is, and hopefully we'll hear more of this. We've only had snippets coming out from the meetings between the representative of the Karabakh Armenians and Azerbaijan, but that's certainly still not enough to know what is going to happen. There are a whole load of issues. What happens with conscription into the Azerbaijani military, which sounds totally unrealistic for decades to come, to be quite honest, or what happens with with the local police force? Who's going to man it? There are so many things that they would like to hear. But first of all, I think they have to hear them, and secondly, it's got to be a genuine message. I would like to add, however, that very definitely, I don't know if this is related or not related, but very definitely recently, I've again returned to the co-inhabited villages and also towns where ethnic Armenians and ethnic Azerbaijanis do live together. And they do live together even after 2020. I'll give you one example. I stopped off in a cafe in the center of Marneuli near the market, and Marneuli is something like 83% ethnic Azerbaijani, with about 7 or 8% being ethnic Armenian, and went into this cafe that was staffed by Azerbaijanis speaking Azerbaijani, and I think owned by a Turk, and just sat down. And of course, everywhere around me, I'm hearing Azerbaijani being spoken. And then, at the next table, I suddenly hear Armenian being spoken in that environment. 2 little kids, 7 and 9, and 2 women, one a mother, I don't know who the other one, maybe a grandmother. And they were speaking Armenian quite openly in a room full of Azerbaijani speakers, and everyone didn't bat an eyelid. It was normal for them. That at least makes me think that, or convinces me that this is this is a political and not ethnic conflict. So I do again stress that I think it really depends on the terms of whatever integration process might be offered to the Karabakh Armenians. It probably relates to monitoring that those terms are being adhered to. We still don't know if an international mission will go, but it's also quite possible to use local resources as well. You have the UN and other aid agencies in Baku, headquartered in Baku. There's no reason why they can't do a project in Karabakh, just like they probably do projects in Ganja or Lankaran or God knows where else. But I think fundamentally one of the main problems is, let's really hope that now a peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia can be signed in the very near future. I have really always said that it just strikes me that time is running out for this. First, it was meant to be by the end of 2022, now by the end of 2023. It's sad to say that this exodus, but also true that this exodus from Karabakh also potentially, but let's see, takes away one of the main obstacles to signing this agreement, and that is the issue of the rights and security of the Karabakh Armenians. So hopefully an agreement between Yerevan and Baku can be signed in the very near future.
Onnik Krikorian, for your sake, we have to leave it here, leave it there, and I truly hope we get to pick up from this point sometime in the near future, and the background of our conversation would be somewhat less depressing and concerning. Thank you very much for your time, and I was privy to read portions of your article coming up in Common Space Karabakh. You seemed a little emotional in that piece as compared to the piece that I started this conversation with in the Caspian Post. I cannot wait for it to be published so I could read it as well.
Yeah, can I just explain that emotion? I've since edited it, actually, by the way, so it sounds a little bit more potentially optimistic. But I feel as though we've had 3 years, almost 3 years, of this situation since the November 2020 ceasefire was signed. And yet this is where we are now. And I think had people not played political and geopolitical games in this, that maybe we could have actually had a peace agreement signed by now, and that we wouldn't have got to the situation that we find ourselves in now, which whilst there's a possibility of a peace agreement being signed, we don't know, because everything is unpredictable in this region, and a lot of the figures involved in the process are also unpredictable. So that's why the emotion, it was frustration, because some of us have been saying this from day one. Let me give you a quick example. Libarijan. From day one, Libarijan was saying, guys, there is no Nagorno-Karabakh. what the most Armenians can get is probably some form of non-territorial cultural autonomy within Azerbaijan, like, for example, the Armenians of Istanbul have. In June 2021, he was co-author of a white paper written with two other diaspora Armenian academics, where he warned that it may be the Russian peacekeepers stay on past 2025, but what happens if they leave? He also said that people have got to do everything in order to create an environment where Karabakh Armenians can remain in their homes. And on all those things, nobody did. People instead believed that maybe independence or remedial succession or full autonomy or whatever it might be were possible, and nothing else could be even spoken about, let alone thought about. We now have a situation where we don't know what the future of the Russian peacekeeping force is, and that's more complicated because of Ukraine now, which nobody could have predicted. So people really should have used the time wisely, because this is an unpredictable region and it is an unpredictable world. And then as for the ethnic Armenians of Karabakh, it seemed to be that everyone just thought, oh, the Russians are here or whatever. Either we get an international peacekeeping mission in or we don't. But, you know, the situation will be stable for however long we can string this out for. And the reality is that it was not stable. Sorry for that rant. You got me emotional.
That's exactly why I asked you to come here, so you could rant, and that's why we invite people, so they would say what they think and not what they're, you know, maybe expected to say. I do really appreciate, the best part of this conversation is when we both speak from the heart, which I try to do as much as I can, and I appreciate the fact that you did as well.
Thank you, Ismail. And
Thank
one day
you.
I hope we'll meet.
I truly do hope so, and I'll send you a message after the broadcast. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Have a good night. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Onnik James Krikorian, British journalist based in Tbilisi and the author of the article that I'm about to show you on the screen. In the Caspian Post, Nagorno-Karabakh, demise, a long-predicted end to a bitter future. Forgive me, a long-predicted end to a bitter dispute. It was published a couple of days ago on 28 September 2023. I truly hope that you'll get to see the article that is about to be published in Common Space Karabakh. I saw the advanced copy. Onnik was kind enough to send it to me before the broadcast, so I would understand where he's coming from in his comments. I do not want to editorialize. I do not want to basically recap what was said. Those of you who have joined us in the middle of the program, you may go back and rewatch it and watch it from the very beginning. A couple of things I want to say, and I want to reiterate. I believe it is in the interest of the Azerbaijani people for the government to finally understand. You cannot restrict the access of Western journalists to your country completely and then complain that the entire West is against you and all of the Western media are biased against you because you're Muslim or Turk or whatever else. That is wrong. Unless the government of Azerbaijan, for whatever reasons, wants its public to think that the entire West is against Azerbaijan. It has come to the point where even I, living in the West, was genuinely surprised for a second to hear the French Foreign Minister, Ms. Colonna, at the UN Security Council reiterate that France understands and recognizes Azerbaijan's territorial integrity. You know, living in Washington, D.C., even I am subjected to the state propaganda of Azerbaijan saying that all of the West hates us, all of the West wants to partition our country. I believe it is in the best interest of the Azerbaijani government to finally allow foreign journalists in. We journalists, there are some bad apples among us, but not all of us are sellouts, not all of us are prostitutes, not all of us will sell our soul and our opinion and our proverbial pen for money or favors. This is not how we operate. Many of us, I would say most of us, the overwhelming majority of us are people of conscience and professionalism, and we do have beliefs and we are open to information. This is what makes us wake up in the morning and go to work. We want to know the truth, and we want our audiences to know the truth. And the government of Azerbaijan will serve its people by allowing my foreign colleagues, my Western colleagues, into the country. And stop hoping that you will control the story. You do not control the story, period. If you don't let them, they're going to write negative stories about Azerbaijan a priori. They're going to go to Armenia, where they're welcomed, where they're allowed to talk to people and do their jobs, and they will write what they see and what they hear. You let them come in, let's see, maybe the story will change. I mean, this is a definition of insanity, doing the same thing and expecting a different result. How do you not understand that? How do you not get it? Which begs a wider philosophical question. I do understand that the authoritarian governments and, what I know of Ilham Aliyev or the things I hear him say on television or publicly makes me believe that the president of Azerbaijan does not value public opinion. He does not think that public opinion is important, that it has a seat at the table, that the public opinion dictates that politicians act a certain way. Definitely not so in Azerbaijan, but the United States, France, Germany, Western Europe in general, are not Azerbaijan. There are different forces at work there. There are different dynamics in the societies. The public opinion is formed by journalists whom you do not allow into your country. So they write a story based on what they see from the other side of the conflict. And then the public opinion gathers force, and it forces its own politicians to act. Yeah, some of them are populist, some of them want to score points, some of them want to make a name on the conflict, on the death of Azerbaijanis and Armenians. Yes, that is true, and that does exist. But some of them are genuinely reacting to the grassroots pressures in their own nations, in the United States, in Canada, in France, and in Germany, and they force their foreign ministries or State Department to adopt certain positions on the conflict. And then the government of Azerbaijan complains to its own people and to the world of the anti-Azerbaijani bias. I don't know how else to present this to you, but not everywhere public opinion is something to be discarded, ignored, bought, sold, exchanged, manipulated, and influenced. In some places, what people think really matters. And I truly hope Azerbaijan becomes one of those countries soon, where our opinion, what a person on the street thinks, makes the government act a certain way, where people are not beaten and arrested for their opinion. Because let's take a critical look at ourselves. A nation that imprisons a London School of Economics professor only for what he says, and only for what he writes, and only for what he believes, who is ethnic Azerbaijani. How can this nation extend an olive branch to Armenians and expect to be believed that their views will be respected if they have a different view, if they're dissidents politically, or let's say they don't see eye to eye with the Azerbaijani government on reintegration? What is going to happen to these people? Are they going to be allowed to express their opinions? And if you say yes, how would they believe you? How do people in Azerbaijan now, how are they treated if they disagree with the Azerbaijani government? That is a question ethnic Armenians are asking themselves. What happens to people who disagree with Ilham Aliyev, with the police, with, I don't know, the security apparatus? What happens to people who criticize government corruption, of which there is a lot in Azerbaijan? Let's even forget politics for 1 second. What happens to people who disagree with corrupt government officials in the way they dispense with their day-to-day duties? What happens to those people? And if I were an ethnic Armenian, what would happen to me? These are the questions that I believe the government of Azerbaijan should be asking itself. And these are the questions I believe that everybody who is on those highways for miles and miles, waiting in their cars to get through the border checkpoint, are asking themselves, or were asking themselves before they got in these cars and decided to leave the country. No matter whether I'm Azerbaijani, American, Indonesian, Chinese, Malaysian, like the UNHCR representative, for instance, we all have conscience. We all ask ourselves why and how things are happening, and whether we're going to be held responsible for the events that happened on our watch. As a citizen, as a journalist, as anybody else, what were you doing? What were you thinking? What were you feeling? No, what were you truly feeling when things like that happened? I have not built my career based on what people think of me. Many people who've disagreed with me and called me a traitor and all kinds of names. Let's not rehash our greatest hits. Many of these people have come to see my point in the future, later. It brings me no joy. I'm not secretly elated by the fact that Armenians are leaving Azerbaijan and now we're going to live happily ever after without them, in our country. As I said, strong governments, strong states fight enemies and enemy armies. Weak governments and weak states fight civilians. I know that Azerbaijan cannot close its borders and force these people to stay, because then Azerbaijan will open a whole different Pandora's box of accusations. I know that all Azerbaijan can do is open its borders and facilitate these people's safe passage to Armenia, which, again, we started our program with this. The United Nations, UNHCR, High Commissioner for Refugees, says that there are no reports that Armenians were mistreated while, en route from Karabakh through the checkpoint to to Armenia. Yes, that is true. And I hope people hear that message. But on the other hand, probably, if you ask me what should have been done, Azerbaijan should have communicated a little more clearly and much earlier what it was planning to do, how it was planning to incorporate these people before they packed up and left. After they're leaving, I don't know what kind of a message will be effective anymore. What are they going to do? Turn around and come back? Do we really believe that? Anyway, thank you for indulging and listening to my thoughts, which have nothing to do with my guest, by the way. But I thought that on this particular subject, I could be forgiven for addressing my people, whoever is watching me in Azerbaijan, in Armenia, hopefully in the Azerbaijani government, because these are the questions we should be asking ourselves. And I understand the sense of humiliation that we Azerbaijanis have felt. I felt it all of my life until 2020. We were wronged, and we are trying to make ourselves whole again. I am not revising, or changing my positions that I've held. Everybody knows I'm a very public person. I'm open. You ask me what I think, and I'll tell you everything. I don't hide behind rhetoric. I say what I think, and I do what I say. And that probably explains many things in my biography. Many things. But right now, I feel whole again. Not because we're kicking out ethnic Armenian civilians, no, but because we seem to have won the war. Now we are not in a humiliated position. We're in a position of power. By we, I mean ethnic Azerbaijanis. I think now it's time to show compassion. I said in public that my childhood ended, and I remember the day and the time when I saw the very first refugees with my own eyes. In 1987, ethnic Azerbaijanis thrown out of Kafan of Armenia. That was the first shot in this whole mess. And I don't care what politicians or historians or everybody else will say to you. I have lived it. This is my life. And these are the things I have seen with my eyes. No one in the entire world can convince me that it was otherwise. I was right there. I saw it. I heard them. We lived in the Soviet Union. We thought we live in the greatest nation on earth. And whoopsie, you have refugees, people who ran from one Soviet republic to the other for safety. This was shocking to a 14-year-old, and I remember that. But at some point, it has to change. It has to stop. If we, as Azerbaijani people who have seen what refugees look like, we know their pain, we understand their pain, we can empathize with it, we should find it in our hearts not to repeat the same, not to do the same to other people. If we want to hold high moral ground, this is a time. And I've said this all in Russian and Azerbaijani abundantly on my channel, but I would like to repeat it in English as well. It is time to end this insanity because we have one enemy. It is not Armenia, and Armenia's enemy is not the Turk or Azerbaijani. We have one enemy to the north of us who will always seek to exploit this conflict in order to gain its own advantages in the region and gain a foothold in the region. It is Russia. It is the Russian Federation that started the whole thing at the end of the Soviet Union. And look, it's been 30 years and they're still using this conflict. They're still benefiting from this conflict. They're still capitalizing on this conflict. Does it not become painfully obvious anymore? I mean, what else has to happen for the people of Azerbaijan and the people of Armenia to understand who benefits from this conflict? I mean, did we benefit from it? I mean, I'm asking Armenians, did you benefit from it? What benefits, if any, did you see? I mean, and I don't want to be cynical. I'm asking this question as more than 100,000 people are pouring into your borders right now. And Armenia is not a very rich nation to begin with. Nor is Azerbaijan. I mean, let's not confuse the personal wealth of the Aliyev family with the wealth of the people. 100,000 people are coming into Armenia. How did you benefit from it? How did you benefit from 30 years of laying ruin to Azerbaijani cities, destroying them completely, keeping pigs in our mosques, knowing how offensive it is? Armenians have lived around Muslims all your history, ever since Islam was incepted. You know how offensive it was, and that's probably why people did it. I can name the cities, I can name dates, I can name times, and I can name atrocities, and I don't want to, because I think it is enough. I want to illustrate the point. Neither Armenia nor Azerbaijan benefited from this barbarity. This is how the West looks at us. I'm sorry. I mean, they might be telling you different things. But I live in a Western society, and I've lived here most of my life. Much more than I've lived in Azerbaijan or USSR. It doesn't look good for either one of us. It doesn't make one of us civilized and the other barbarian. Both of us are, we appear barbarian to the Westerner. Some more, some less, but is this what we want for our future? Imagine what would happen to the region. Azerbaijan and Armenia would be halfway to the European Union now if this conflict never happened. Russia wouldn't know what to do because you would have no reason to keep them there in Armenia. We would have no reason to keep them in Azerbaijan. There would be no nonsense and misnomer like Russian peacekeepers. This is ridiculous, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity for me to say what I think. I only think it's fair. After all, you come here to listen to my guests, but you also hopefully come here to listen to me. And I've said my piece, and from this point, I truly hope. I truly hope at least one of you have heard me. Bye.